gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to Robert's Sports Show. I'm your host, Robert. College football week number choice. Alright, week 2, win-loss, I was 26-3, which puts me 48-10 year-to-date. Against the spread, I was 12-7, which makes a year-to-date of 22-20. Over-under, I was 10-9, which makes a year-to-date of 23-19. Here in week choice, we'll have 31 games to go over, so we'll see if I continue my fairly decent, I guess you would say, picks and everything. First thing is, I want to note in here, like last week I didn't mention the rankings. Right now, I think the college football rankings are just a farce. It's just something for people to talk about. It doesn't mean a hell of fucking beans right now, especially the fact that the championship committee will do their rankings, week 4, week 5? But with that, there's 130 FBS teams. Only the Power 5 teams can make the Final Four playoff. So that's only 64 teams capable of making the playoffs. Out of those 64, I predict there's only, I'd say 24 that are good enough, capable enough, namesake enough to make the Final Four. Out of that, 24 that are capable, there's only, in the 4 years that there's been a playoff system, only 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 different schools have made it. Clemson's done it 3 times, Florida State, only 2 out of the ACC. The only Big 12 school has been Oklahoma. The only 2 SEC schools, Georgia and Alabama. Only 2 Big Tens, Ohio State and Michigan State. Only 2 Pac-12s, Oregon and Washington. So with that being said, there's a lot of these schools this year that are basically going to take each other out of the possibility of a national championship. Last year we seen Wisconsin go undefeated in the regular season. They lost the Big Ten championship game. With 1 loss, they were held out. Well, we've seen Georgia with 1 loss make it in, non-conference champion. We've seen Ohio State make it in, non-conference champion. We've seen conference champions be left out, Penn State, back in Washington. So, for the Power 5, the schools that I think have a legit shot, ACC, Clemson and Miami. Possibility of Florida State. Right now, Clemson is 2-0. They play for Florida State October. Miami's 1-1. They play Florida State in October. Florida State is 1-1. Florida State is going to decide either they win both those games, one of those games, or none of those games. They're going to almost help decide who's going to win the ACC, be in the ACC championship game, who may or may not represent the ACC in the Final Four. Big Ten, they are going to beat up on each other. Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Penn State are all 2-0 right now. Ohio State plays Michigan State, Michigan, Penn State. Michigan State plays Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Michigan State. Wisconsin plays Penn State, Michigan. So they're going to beat up on each other and decide who's going to represent the East. I know where Ohio State's out of. Yeah, the East versus who's going to play Wisconsin in the West. Big 12. Right now there are 5 2-0 schools in the Big 12. Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, TCU, Baylor. So those only 4, my bad. I looked at it wrong. 4 2-0 schools in the Big 12. But they all play each other. So they're almost going to cost each other, because I think for a Big 12 school to make the Final Four playoff, they have to be undefeated. They have to win the Big 12 undefeated. I don't think a 1-loss Big 12 champion, because there is a championship game this year, is going to make the playoffs. So who's going to come out of that undefeated? Pac-12. Oregon, is 2-0. Washington and USC is 1-1. They play each other. What happens if we have an undefeated Notre Dame? They're not really conference associated. They do play majority ACC schools. But how's the committee going to look for them? Now, they play USC. They play Florida State. What if they beat both of those schools? Or if both of those schools beat them, does it help them? The SEC, they have 6 schools right now that's 2-0, and they're going to play each other. Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Mississippi State, and Missouri. Missouri and Georgia out of the East. But Missouri plays Alabama and Georgia. Georgia plays Auburn, LSU, Florida. Alabama plays Auburn, LSU, Missouri, Mississippi State. So they're all playing each other. They all got to beat each other or beat up on each other. Is there a possibility of a Final Four playoff without an ACC team or an SEC team? Can the SEC beat up on each other enough? Would a 2-loss SEC team be in the playoffs over a 1-loss Big 12 team? What if 2 schools go undefeated and not only access possible for the Big 12? I know the Big 10, you could have Wisconsin undefeated versus undefeated Ohio State. Wisconsin wins the Big 12. Would a 1-loss Ohio State be in over 9? Yeah, I mean, there's just so many things that could happen. I think they need to get rid of these rankings early in the season. There's no point for them. Because it's just pointless watching teams go up and down 9-10 spots. And a lot of times, the preseason rankings will actually help a school through the season. Because if they get ranked high in the preseason, then they have a couple wins, then they have a loss, then they have a couple more wins, they're going to stay in the top 25. Then you have schools like Central Florida that are in the top 10, top 15, that have no shot of ever making the playoffs because they're in a non-Power 5 conference. All this being said, you need to check out my realignment. I filmed first of 2018, one of the first videos of the year. I'll try to get it in the link up top. You can take and see it. It's basically a realignment. It's creating 2 conferences that the winners of each conference plays a national championship game. It's like, I think it's East versus West, basically what it amounts to. But alright, we're going to dive into the Week 3 games here, 31 of them for you. Now, there's multiple games that are affected by Hurricane Florence, or possibly could be affected by Hurricane Florence, as the hurricane heads towards South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, East Coast. So some of these games may or may not take place. We'll just see what happens. Hopefully that everyone is safe during the hurricane. I know I do have some family in the Virginia area. Hopefully they're safe. So definitely want to make sure no one gets hurt. Everyone gets, everything they can. Nothing, hopefully they don't lose everything. No lives, no pets, no nothing. Hopefully everyone's safe during this trying time of the hurricane on the East Coast. First game, we have the Central Florida Knights 2-0 versus the North Carolina Tar Heels 0-2. This game is played in North Carolina, so this game may be affected by the hurricane. I do have the Knights winning. They're favored by 14.5. I got them covering. I'm taking over on the 55.5. Next, we have the Georgia State Panthers 1-1 versus the Memphis Tigers 1-1. Memphis is favored by 27 at home. I am getting the Panthers to cover the 27, picking Memphis to win and under on the 54. Next, we have the Lehigh Mountain Hawks 1-1 versus the Navy Midshipmen 1-1. Straight up win there for Navy. Next, we have the Georgia Southern Eagles 2-0 versus the 2-0 Clemson Tigers. Clemson is favored by 34. I am taking Clemson to win. I got Georgia Southern covering the 34. I'm taking over on the 45.5. Next, we have the Miami Hurricanes 1-1 versus the Toledo Rockets 1-0. Miami favored by 9.5. I got them winning, covering the 9.5 and over on the 56.5. Next, we have the Florida State Seminoles 0-1 versus the Syracuse Orange 2-0. Florida State's favored by 3.5. Syracuse is an interesting team. Who can they beat of the ACC teams like a Florida State, like a Miami, that's going to really just fuck up the entire playoff scenario? I do have Florida State winning this, covering it 3.5 and under on the 63. Next, we have the Kent State Golden Flashes 1-1 versus the Penn State Nittany Lions 2-0. Penn State favored by 34. I got them winning, covering the 34. Under on the 59.5. Next, we have the BYU Cougars at 1-1 versus the Wisconsin Badgers 2-0. Badgers favored by 21.5. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 44.5. All right. Next, we have the SMU Mustangs 0-2 versus the Michigan Wolverines. Is Jim Harbaugh ever going to make Michigan a playoff contender? My live studio audience says no. But hey, we'll see what happens. All right. Michigan favored by 35.5 in this game. I got them winning, covering at 35.5, and then under on the 53.5. Next, we have the great matchup. A pair of 2-0 teams. Teams that this could be the loss that knocks them out of the playoffs, actually. Ohio State Buckeyes, representing the Big Ten, 2-0. Versus the TCU Horned Frogs at 2-0. So yeah, I mean, these are two teams that a loss here in week 3 could go a long way for them, either not or making the playoffs. Ohio State is favored by 12. I got them winning, covering, taking over on the 58. Next, we have the Oklahoma Sooners 2-0. Boomer Sooner versus the Iowa State Cyclones 0-1. Oklahoma's favored by 17.5. I actually have the Cyclones covering the 17.5 and under on the 57.5. Next, we have another game that could be affected by the Hurricane Florence. We have the West Virginia Mountaineers at 2-0 versus the NC State Wolfpack at 2-0. West Virginia's favored by 4. I got them winning and covering and over on the 15.5. Next, we have a couple teams that are kind of, they're blue blood programs, but they haven't been blue blood recently. USC Trojans 1-1 versus the Texas Longhorns 1-1. Texas is actually favored by 3 in this matchup. I got them winning, covering the 3 and under on the 65. Next, we have the North Texas Mean Green 2-0 versus the Arkansas Razorbacks 1-1. Arkansas favored by a touchdown at home, winning, covering, under on the 70.5 points. Next, we have the Bethlehem Cook Wildcats at 1-1 versus the Florida Atlantic Owls 1-1. Straight up win, Florida Atlantic. Next, we have a surprising team. I think it's kind of surprising. The Hawaii Rainbow Warriors 3-0 already versus the Army Black Knights 1-1. Army's favored by 6.5. You know what? The Rainbow Warriors are looking good this year. I'm giving the 6.5 to Hawaii. I got them covering and under on the 62.5. Next, the Vanderbilt Commodores 2-0 versus the Notre Dame Fire and Ash 2-0. I think this is a game for Notre Dame where if they have any inkling of possibly making that Final Four playoffs, as an independent school, they almost have to be undefeated, I think, before the committee will even look at them. I think you'll need some 1-2 loss to the Power 5 and then undefeated for them to even sniff it. This is a good matchup for them against the SEC school Vanderbilt, who's 2-0. I do have Notre Dame. They're favored by 14.5. I have them winning, covering, and under on the 53. Next, another game that could be affected by the hurricane. The Ohio Bobcats 1-0 versus Virginia Cavaliers 1-1. Virginia is favored by 6. I am picking them to win, covering the 43.5. Picking them to win, covering the 6, and over on the 43.5. Next, we have the Central Michigan Chippewas versus the North Illinois Huskies. Both teams 0-2. North Illinois favored by 14, winning, covering, and over on the 44.5. Next, we have another big matchup with Boise State Broncos 2-0, which due to the Conference Mountain West they play in, they are unable to be part of the Final Four playoff. Versus a team in Oklahoma State Cowboys 2-0, Big 12 team, have a shot, a legit shot at making the Big 12 title game. These are the games that Boise State, if they want to really kind of play spoiler in this, they need to win games like this. Oklahoma State is favored by 3. This is a winnable game for Boise State. I am picking the Cowboys to win at home. I have them covering the 3 and under on the 63.5. But I wouldn't be surprised if Boise State pulls up the upset. Next, the Tennessee Tech Golden Eagles 0-2 versus the Utah State Aggies 1-1. Straight up win for the Aggies. Next we have the Arizona State Sun Devils 2-0 versus San Diego State Aztecs 1-1. Arizona State favored by 4.5. I do got them winning, covering, and over on the 46. Next we have the UC Davis Aggies 2-0 versus the Stanford Cardinals 2-0 or Cardinal. I do have Stanford covering a straight up win on this. Next, one of those matchups out of the Pac-12 that could go a long way toward the Pac-12 title game. We have the Washington Huskies 1-1 versus the Utah Utes 2-0. Washington favored by 6.5 on the road. I'm giving the 6.5 to the Utes and have them covering and over on the 47.5. Next, this right here is one of the first games for the SEC where they're going to beat each other up. You have the 2-0 LSU Tigers versus the 2-0 Auburn Tigers. I mean, you have legit here. Whoever wins this, yeah, so this is the next matchup you have here is what the SEC doesn't need to happen for them. They can basically cost each other a chance here. You have the 2-0 LSU Tigers versus the 2-0 Auburn Tigers. Both schools have a legit shot of being possibly in the Final Four, but one of them is going to have one loss after this. Who is the better Tigers? Auburn's favored by 9.5 at home. I am picking Auburn to win. I got them covering the 9.5 and over on the 45. Next, we have the Alabama Crimson Tide 2-0 versus the Ole Miss Rebels 2-0. Here's another one of those SEC scenarios where what if Ole Miss beats Alabama here? Would the entire fabric of college football just go poof? I mean, just think about that. Ole Miss beats Alabama. If Ole Miss went to the SEC title game versus Georgia, say they have one loss. Say Georgia has one loss. Alabama, one loss. Ole Miss wins. Alabama could make the playoffs with one loss. Not even playing in the title game where Ole Miss, your SEC champions, probably would not. That's what's crazy about college football right now. And having a committee sit down and think, oh, I want this team in. No, I want this team here. I can do that. I will do that. Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders 1-1 versus the 2-0 Georgia Bulldogs. Bulldogs favored by 31.5 at home. Bulldogs are going to bulldoze over the Blue Raiders. Have them covering the 31.5 and over on the 54. Louisiana Raging Cajun are 1-0 versus the Mississippi State Bulldogs 2-0. Mississippi State favored by 31.5, winning, covering, under on the 64. The Troy Trojans are 1-1 versus Nebraska Cornhuskers 0-1. Nebraska's favored by 11.5. I got them winning, covering the 11.5 and under on the 58. Now the last game that I have on here, the one of 4 games that could be affected by the Hurricane Florence. We have the South Mississippi State Golden Eagles 1-1 versus the Appalachian State Mountaineers 1-1. Appalachian State favored by 14.5 at home, winning, covering, and over on the 46.5. And last but not least, we have the Arkansas State Red Wolves 1-1 versus the Texas Tulsa Golden Hurricanes 1-1. Speaking of Hurricanes, Arkansas State favored by 2. I got the Red Wolves winning, covering, and under on the 72. Alright, so that's going to wrap up week 3 of the NCAA college football season. Hopefully I'll be on the winning track like I was in week 2. We definitely, as we're going forward, we'll look at the possible playoff scenarios, multiple games here that could affect the Final Four playoffs. Maybe as it gets closer, I will do my own rankings of who I feel should and shouldn't be in there. I don't think it should be eliminated. It should be just on the Power 5 conferences only. I know people talk about strength of schedule, but guess what? If your schedule's set and you win the most games on your schedule, then I just don't understand it completely. You need to have it like other sports. And I know it's still college, whatever. I mean, technically they are getting paid. They are getting a college education for playing football. College football is $1 billion a year sport. Business. I'm sorry, when your head coaches are making tens of millions of dollars, it's a fucking business. It's a money-making business. Come on now. You have 70,000 fans at some of these stadiums. It's a business. We don't need to treat it like we just have a group of people sitting in a room going, I think this team should make the playoffs. I think this should. So, I mean, you tell these kids, I mean, you're telling, to me, it's like there's winning, there's losing. Winning should matter. Losing should matter. But when you tell, when you say good win, good loss, bad loss. A loss is a loss, a win's a win. If you win by 1 point or 50 points, it's still a win. It doesn't change the fact it's a win. If a team goes out and beats another team, Appalachian State beat Michigan. Bad loss for Michigan. Good win for a win's a win, a loss is a loss. Set this up where you have 2 conferences. You have divisions in those conferences. You play your division. You play a few games out of your division. You have 2 conferences. Those are or divisions or whatever you want to call them. You have 2 different conferences basically. You have your national championship game. Bam! It's all settled on the field. Not because the committee says, well, the Power 5 should be in the playoffs. The non-Power 5 can't be. So you took your 130 teams to 64, and legit out of the 64, 20 can possibly make the playoffs. They're good enough, ever. Out of that, you're going to have 10. You have 10 schools of 130 that can be in your Final Four. They got to fix it. All right. That wraps up week 3. I'm off my soapbox rant now. As always, check out that video about the realignment. Make sure you check out all the other shows on Robert Sports Show. NFL Week 2, NASCAR, Pro Wrestling, the whole 9. As always, thanks for watching Robert Sports Show. Don't just have a great day. Have a spiffy day. Robert Sports Show, your YouTube leader in sports content.